Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to have my friend back, Steve. And we're going to talk about today his big cats and climate and peace, you know. And Steve, we normally talk about what the work that you're doing and, what we're dealing with climate wise and so forth. We're going to take a little bit of a turn today and talk about how the cats of the wild bring a lot of peace to the forest and us.
Well, that's very true, but all of nature does. I think we should concentrate on the broader picture of during COVID of what nature can actually give us and the importance of our natural world on Peace Day today.
Okay.
Being in nature or even seeing scenes of nature reduce things like fear, stress, and it increases pleasant feelings. Even exposure to looking at images of nature makes you feel better emotionally, contributes to your physical well being, reducing blood pressure, stress, your heart rate, muscle tension. And it's an amazing thing. In the journal Mind, 90% of the people being interviewed said their mood improved after spending time outside, viewing scenes of nature, changing from depressed, stressed, and anxious to more calm and balanced. We kind of call it vitamin R. And it's really tough for us when we live in urban areas to actually have an opportunity to be around nature, but it's even going to a park in your city, being around green trees, or just being somewhere where you might hear birds singing or whatever. I mean, it's just really important to us as humans. In a broader sense, I think we need to actually look at the planet in which we live as a living organism. And we don't often think of it that way. But I think we'd be better off if we did and understand the life that it gives all living beings on the planet.
Interesting. Steve, as being one of the top journalists, wildlife journalists over at Nat Geo, you go into sometimes dangerous situations. Okay, but where do you get your peace from when you are out there, in the wild? Does that give you peace, and what does it feel like?
Well, just like the study I was just reading about that was primarily from the University of Minnesota, then the journal Mind. I mean, it shows that our stress levels drop when we get into nature. So you look at this quote danger differently because we're entering into the natural world, and specifically when I'm working with a big cat, I'm a guest in their home. So you always have to understand what being a guest means. A lot of that is respect for the position you're in. You're entering someone else's home. When you normally enter someone's home, you ring the doorbell, knock on the door, you talk about, you present yourself, but you come in there with respect. And so we have to understand that they're not, those big cats are not to hurt us. In many ways, they don't care about us unless we're something that will bring them a problem or pain, like hunters or things like that. And obviously, hunting has plummeted with these big cats. It's primarily poachers that come in to feed the trade for traditional medicine parts. But I'm not one of them. I don't primarily work in forests where I know that there are problems with these animals because I won't see them. So if we enter into any of our situations in life where we're working with people we've just met or animals we've just met, enter into it with respect and an ethical background and empathy.
Hmm, that's a very powerful thing to say. Steve, have you ever traveled in Latin America in their forests at all?
Oh, I spent my first about 8 or 9 years working in Latin America.
Wow. And what is some of the peaceful times you recall with some of the animals that you have shot there for yourself?
Well, one of the first wildlife story I did was on top of a mountain in a cloud forest in Guatemala. And so, after being a photojournalist in the New York City area, sitting in a blind looking at the nest of a tree for 10, 12 hours a day gave you a lot of peace. And I understood the importance of the symphony of the forest, which is the sounds of the birds calling, because really all you heard were birds. Early in the morning, you would hear howler monkeys, groups of monkeys coming through the trees, being in their family groups. And if they were moving, they might tell the rest of the forest that they were moving. And so the matriarch or the male might make a call out. But primarily, what you heard was the symphony of the forest, which is the bird songs. And it was absolutely incredible. And it really calmed me down because it was a stressful situation because of people,
Wow.
because the Nature Conservancy had just bought this area, and the caretakers, which was the father and brother of the naturalist I was working with, were both shot with shotguns. Um, these loggers that did not want the area protected shot them. They didn't die. The brother eventually died from complications of because and so I was worried when I would see men with guns walking through the forest. I just wouldn't make a noise. I would sit there. I could see them in the distance. I was in a valley. I could see them walking on trails in the distance. So that was my only stress. The rest of it
Wow.
was a really calming sense until one day I was walking back up the trail at the end of the night when the hair on the back of my head stood up and I got goosebumps all over. And I felt like something was following me. And that's our primordial part of our brain saying something is following you. And I found out a few days later what that was when it came to visit me at night while I was sleeping in my bunk reading my book like I do every night. When I heard the stairs creaking, then the floorboards creaking, and I thought I was a dead man. I thought these are the guys with the guns coming for me. The door was locked, but what good would it do to a shotgun blast at close range? And then I heard scratching under the door, then sniffing. And all the hair on my whole body stood up. I grabbed the walkie talkie, called down to Juan Carlos because he stayed with me the first few days. And I said, "You can't stay with me. You have 7 brothers and sisters. Your parents are in the hospital because mother's watching father and brother in Guatemala City." So I grabbed my walkie-talkie to call him, and he said in Spanish, "Steve, don't worry, it's just a Black Panther." And I, he started laughing, and I was like, "Well, how come in 5 weeks you never told me I was living with a Black Panther?" And he said, "We didn't want to worry you because he won't hurt you." And that was my first introduction to a big cat. And I find it interesting that my mind knew I was being followed by something, though you turn around on a trail in the rainforest, cloud forest, just this profusion of plants where you can't see, 12 feet behind you on the trail because it's all plants. But this cat was following me because it's interested. What are cats? Curious. It didn't want to hurt me. I'm not food. We have to realize we stink. We smell like chemical factories. We use shampoos, deodorants, toothpaste, colognes, perfumes. That when we walk by, we don't smell like food. We smell really bad to an animal. They want to stay away from us. So I
Wow.
learned through experience. And that's the best teacher in many instances. And the people that I worked with, which are local people that live in all the areas, whether it's Africa when I'm working with big cats there, or Asia or other locations in Latin America. Learn from the local people. They live with the animals and they know them the best. And they're the human caretakers of the forest. And in many instances, their gods reside in the forest. They believe and worship the natural world. And so who better to learn from than people have that have the ultimate respect for the world, our planet that keeps us alive, gives us the air that we breathe, the water we drink, and the land, the rich soil in which we grow our food, which feeds millions.
Wow, Steve. Wow. I mean, that,
Still there? I
yeah,
just
you're
got a
still
phone call. There we are.
okay. No, Steve, I have to tell you, that was a very powerful story. I mean, a powerful story. You had me on the edge of my seat, especially when you were talking about when you were at home and the hairs on your body just went up. I bet that Black Panther was gorgeous.
Yeah, 3 weeks later, I did see him or her. I would sit in that blind with my lens trained on the nest of the bird I was photographing, the quetzal. It was the sacred bird of the Maya and the Aztecs. And I heard all this bark falling from a tree. At first, I didn't know what it was, but in the forest, you hear nothing. In the cloud forest, the trees are so tall and they have all these air plants, epiphytes, bromeliads. You might hear one of them fall as it's full of water from rains the night before or something. But this was all this crashing. And right at first, I looked up and I saw a black tail. And I thought, oh, howler monkey, because that was the only monkeys around. But howler monkeys aren't solitary, so you wouldn't see one of them. So I was like, wow, that's weird. And I was outside of the blind with my machete, cutting some plants that were in the way of my lens. Um, and then looked up and saw the tail was that big around, and it was the Black Panther because I mark my territory around my blind, just like big cats and other animals mark their territory. Because all the local people said, watch out for the wild pigs. They'll come after you and you'll have to climb a tree. And I said, I'm not going to climb a tree. There's no branches. These trees are giant. They're 150 feet tall. So I thought, well, I'll just mark my territory. And so it hit the point, went up the tree, and then I watched it walk across branch to branch, branches that are as big as normal trees. And then it went beyond my point, and then I saw it walk down. And I sat there with my mouth open and didn't get any pictures because the lens and the camera was on a large iPod, and the lens was a 600 or 800 millimeter anyway. And I stood in awe of this animal, and then
Wow.
off it went.
Wow.
And then 30 minutes later, I got a picture I'd waited about 2 months for, got on the walkie talkie and called Juan Carlos and said, I'm done. I'm leaving tomorrow.
Wow.
But what
And
an experience.
yes, and was that your foray into working
Yes.
with big cats? Wow.
That was
Wow.
why I always say I didn't choose big cats. Big cats chose me just because that cat was curious. Because had no background in any kind of biology, big cats. I was more interested in people. And my foray into photography was my father teaching me, and then looking at National Geographic and specifically in Life magazine, many of the civil rights images from photographers like Charles Moore, who had very famous images from Alabama and Mississippi. And I was only a little kid, but they were very impactful to me because then we would see the same images on the nightly news and you'd hear them being spoken about. And I thought, this is what I want to do. Looking at National Geographic, I want to walk the streets of the villages that I see and meet those interesting people. I'm getting some kind of weird buzz in my. Hi, everybody. Maybe this is over. I don't know. Looks like we lost Gail. I'm still here, but I think we may have lost Gail. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you all. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe and be healthy. Oops, I just saw her again, so we'll hold on. The stay safe part is vitally important since numbers seem to be going up of COVID. So please watch what you do. I've been around many outbreaks of diseases that have jumped from animals to people in different parts of the world, and we can see how serious this is. So keep you and your family safe, no matter what it takes. Even if it's something you may not be comfortable with, like wearing a mask, do it anyway. All right. Stay safe and be healthy.